Hi, this is Robert Brown with the Kentucky Valley Educational Cooperative, and I want to welcome you to this episode of the Digitalacha podcast. Digitalacha was developed by the Kentucky Valley Educational Cooperative to inspire creativity and enable educators to network in real time and share professional learning experiences that ensures equity, access, and opportunity for all in our remote rural areas, regardless of their zip codes. All learners are individuals and must be provided equitable opportunities for learning experiences that enable them to succeed both academically and socially. So today, that brings us to our conversation that we're fortunate to have with Jeff Hawkins, the director of the Kentucky Valley Educational Cooperative. He's here today to talk about the design lab that's being created to help do exactly what we just introduced, how to get access to great professional learning opportunities for a variety of things to our students and to our educators. Now, COVID-19 did help to make this design lab be successful, but some of this work, as I know it here, has been in development even pre-COVID. So first of all, welcome, Jeff. I appreciate you joining us today for the podcast.
Hey, Rob. Good to be here.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Well, you look good with that background. I like your KVEC background there. It's nice.
I stole it from you. So they say some of the best things in life are stuff you got for free, or you took an idea somebody else had. So thank you.
Well, and I appreciate that too. Except I stole it from somebody else. So we'll just keep sharing the love here. But Jeff, as we get started, tell us about your role with KVEC, and tell us about KVEC, who we are and what we do.
So I'm the director here at KVEC, and KVEC is one of, I think there are 9 now, education service agencies in Kentucky. For whatever reason, decades ago, Kentucky decided they would call an education service agency a cooperative, which is really fitting because that's what we do. We work in a cooperative way across school districts and across communities in our region to be able to support the work that goes on in classrooms in a pretty comprehensive nature. And KVEC began in 1969. I wasn't actually here then, no matter how white my hair may be. I wasn't here at that time. But interestingly enough, KVEC actually started as a need by rural school districts to be able to provide driver's education to kids in their communities. So they came together and said we could actually afford it if we could share a driver's ed teacher and a vehicle and the little lab that they use for teaching driver's ed. And that really is what helped to launch the work. Over time, KVEC grew and expanded. And early on, they began to do adult education programs in the 8 counties that were members of KVEC at the beginning. They became one of the cooperatives for special education, regional approach for special ed, flow-through money from the Kentucky Department of Education and USDE. Became an agency or an organization that focused on purchasing and procurement, because you can get stuff cheaper if you buy in bulk. So I actually came to work here about 20 years ago. And it's been a really interesting opportunity to be able to see the organization grow and expand over that time. When I came here, Dr. Desi Bowling was already working here at the time. And we were able to work together to, as I said earlier, grow and expand the work that KVEC did. And we really did that by rethinking the work that KVEC would do. Instead of focusing on compliance to make sure that people were in line with rules and regulations and purchasing and procurement, we decided that, along with our board, that we would focus on what we believe the key elements of school to be: teaching, learning, and leading. And we reshaped all of our programs to aim at those three very specific things that are relative to school, because by then purchasing and procurement had become pretty automated. Now you can get online and basically you're going to get the same price no matter who you are, and so that was what we did. We've been very fortunate during these 20 years that KVEC did grow from the original 8 districts that were part of KVEC up to 23. And the reason I would say that we have been able to do that because we changed the focus. We focus on the core business of school: teaching kids, helping educators get better, developing leadership capacity, and focusing on the way that we learn with the resources that are necessary to do that. And
yeah, you said you've been there 20 years, and I keep thinking about my time. I started visiting the KVEC offices in 2003, and it's hard for me to come to grips. It's been 17 years.
yeah,
I've been coming here. So the word I like to use, focus on KVEC, is transformational. And looking at what has occurred in the changing and focus, like you said, students are always first. So all the programs always start with the students as they work up. And part of that work, and I've seen it with the Forging Innovation and Rural Education grants, I've seen it with your Student Senate and other activities that are occurring. But what I want to talk to you about today is, because of COVID and the need for virtual learning, there was a design put in place where teachers and students can access just-in-time online professional learning, resources, webinars, whatever they need, through a design lab that KVEC has created. How did that design lab originate? How did they get started?
Yeah, and I'm going to go backwards a little bit beyond the design lab, because we really began the work years ahead of that. And I think one of the things that we believe pretty strongly here is that you don't do something unless you know why you're doing it, and based on the need that is in existence. So one of the things that we know in our region, geographically, we're a little bigger than Connecticut. Everybody talks about that. The terrain is challenging. We do not have an interstate in our region that doesn't bisect us. We don't have a public university. So we are rural in every sense of the word. What we knew then and know now even more profoundly is that kids who go through our school systems need an opportunity to increase their curricula. They need a more robust set of coursework in order to be able to perform in the world as we know it today. So many years ago, we began trying to think through how we could increase curricular opportunities for our students, and how we could increase opportunities for professional learning for our educators at every level. We did that initially by working with districts to share teachers across district boundaries, so that a Spanish teacher may actually teach children in a couple of different districts, or a music teacher would be able to do that. From there, we also recognized that we needed, and I think initially when we came up with the thought, we wanted to create a learning portal, a web page design that we could put a bunch of stuff into. Right about the time that we were beginning to think through how we could create our own, and I want to be really clear, we did not want to use Facebook. We did not want to use Twitter or some external platform, because there are problems with external platforms about privacy, about content, about shaping opinion. So we wanted one that was independent. I happened to run into a guy named Bruce Parson, and in conversation, he said, "I've been working on this thing that I'm calling the Holler," and it was exactly what we had thought of, but he had the technical ability to be able to have already begun it and conceptualize it. So, just like this background behind me that I stole off you, that you got off somebody else, we said, you know what, you really need to come to work for us, and we need to make the Holler work for all of us, for K-12 and for community. So by having access to that and building content in the Holler and expanding upon its abilities, we have been able to begin the process of creating that place-based online social learning network. And that's what we're trying to create, to increase a more robust opportunity for students as learners and for professionals so that they can increase their capacity. And as importantly, to reframe the story about education in Appalachia. Because as we've talked about before, our story has really been told by people outside of this region for more than a century.
Right.
And that story is not the version of us that we know and we see every day.
We get the Hollywood version, not the real version.
We get the Hollywood or the let's sell some soap version, where folks want to come and do a story about how bad it is, because that alarming nature will make people want to watch a show, and then you can sell some soap bars while you're on there to commercial folks. Right. Tragedy sells a lot more stuff than the truth in a lot of cases.
Yeah, exactly. So with that storytelling, and again, I'm coming back to transformational, because a lot of things that you just described have been happening for several years, through the Holler and through the resources with the Holler. So with the storytelling and other things, how is the design lab, how does it fit into that whole development?
Yeah, I think it was either a happy accident, or we may have been a little bit more forward thinking than we realized at the time. But we began work, like I said, with the Holler as an independent platform. We were also fortunate enough to secure some grants along the way that helped us help our member school districts begin the movement to a one-to-one model, so that they could have devices for all kids K through 12. Different districts are still at different stages of that, but COVID really caused an acceleration for them to move in that direction. We also, 6 or 7 years ago, were able to help districts create a next generation classroom in every school. And for us, the definition of next generation was to have a interactive, large screen, they call it a Mondo board, in front of the room with multiple cameras, multiple microphones, the ability for kids to interact in a touch screen environment and connect to people all over the world. So a lot of work in preparation had been done prior to COVID. I do believe that our districts, because of work that we were able to engage them in, that transformational work, that innovation, and you innovate out of necessity, helped them be a little bit further along when COVID necessitated their move toward a virtual learning environment. And what brought us to the design lab this summer, because all districts in Kentucky had to go virtual back in the spring, and they were able to use a system that had been in place before called NTI, non-traditional instructional days. But NTI was never intended to be long-term or to introduce new content to kids. It was intended, especially in Eastern Kentucky, where weather is challenging, road conditions are bad, to have provided those kids an opportunity on bad weather days when it was not safe to travel, to reinforce learning that had taken place before in the short term, 2 or 3 days at a time, no more than 10 over the course of a year. So during the summer, based on all of that and the projections of what we know the future may or may not look like, our Department of Education reached out to all the cooperatives in Kentucky and said, we'd like to be able to work with you in the development of a design lab to be able to help people become more effective teaching virtually. Their four big components included how to understand an LMS, a learning management system, how to be able to focus on access at home for kids, because all of our districts are, the schools are really state of the art as far as access to technology. Be able to focus on how we build support structures so that teachers can get better at what they do, and administrators, and strategies and techniques that people can employ for teaching virtually. That really made a huge amount of sense for us, because it was work that we had been working on,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes with slightly different terms, but that made sense to us.
So
So
it sounds like an easy shift from what you were
yeah,
doing to what you
yeah,
needed. So yeah,
an easy transition
yeah.
with valid partners at the
Mm-hmm.
departmental level and across the state with practitioners. So our take on building out the design lab was for us to create a professional learning portal. And again, going back to the word that we used before the holler came around, but really an entryway for educators across the board, P through 20, to be able to look at resources that help them figure out how kids can get access at home, how they can use a learning management system, how they can build capacity within their staff and community, and how they can use tools and techniques to help further that learning. We didn't want to do a one-off training, just do a couple of days and bring in key people. We wanted to build into it something that would be sustainable and live forever. And as importantly, we created a place where practitioners can contribute effective solutions.
Yeah.
We don't want to only go out on the web and find some stuff. We want our local educators to capture the story of what they're doing really well and post that into that portal, because we have some of the best educators in the country right here. And right here, we understand the unique challenges, the unique opportunities, and the resources that we have to be put in play in order to be able to learn at a high level.
Mm-hmm.
So having that ability for local good minds of good people to contribute those solutions and share them was an incredibly important step for us to be able to build something that will continue to evolve as we go forward. And it's made so that they can contribute without going through a bunch of hoops.
So if I wanted to see your design lab, how would I get to it?
Go to www.theholler, TheHoller.org. And on that holler, there'll be a slider across the top, and Design Lab is one of the icons that's there. You can click on it and it'll take you directly into it. From there, you can go to any of those four big buckets and begin to drill down into the content that's contained in each one.
So if there's lots of content out there, lots of professional learning, lots of resources. So how, if someone's wanting to put something on yours to share with others, how do we make sure that it meets the rigor that we anticipate? How do we vet what's in there? What
Yeah,
happens?
great question. And we wanted to make it have as few clicks as possible, because one of the most frustrating things for anybody with technology is if it takes too long to navigate through a page. So access is basically 3 clicks after you get to the holler. But in order to submit a best practice or an effective tool or a strategy or whatever, people do it right there on that location. And it goes to one of 4 teams of people, one for each of the 4 big buckets. If people decide that they're going to do one in staffing and support, they may be interested in seeing that you're one of the reviewers. but we review them very quickly. We make every effort to do that within 24 hours, and then we green light that to be posted among our staff. So that's the short version of how to do that.
So if he would go there, it's www.theholler.org. And on the banner, you'd scroll across the banner and find what you're looking for your resources. So there's a lot of information on the Holler. So besides the Design Lab, now I'm intrigued about everything you could find on the Holler. Could you identify some of the other resources that listeners could find there?
The Holler is it is abundant. There's lots of different stuff on there. It is, some people have characterized it as a baby LMS because there is the capacity to have different sets of content be on a learning management system so that people can take a course or a class or a workshop, be able to respond to, in some cases, a brief questionnaire about the content, and receive an electronic badge or a certificate that they completed a particular thing. There are also podcasts that are there about the work that takes place. There are probably now 800 or more Firecast Ignite presentations where teachers and students and administrators talk about innovative practice that they have put in play to expand and increase opportunity and access for learning. Those are interesting because they cover 5 or 6 years now, and it's fun to look at the arc of development among some of the folks who were there, because some of them participated 5 or 6 years ago, and again, very recently. So the level of sophistication and rigor of what they're doing in the classroom is pretty fun to look at, the sophistication that they've approached it with. And there are abundant stories that are told through video in the classroom on subjects from releasing fingerling brown trout into local streams to using drones for STEM technology, 3D printing, virtual reality labs, tiny houses. It is a rich environment that touches the tip of the iceberg about education and learning within this region of the state.
And these are activities and innovative strategies and products are being created by the students in the region.
Yeah.
And those are the stories to tell. What are the great things happening? So, sometimes when you hear about a certain region of Kentucky, and sometimes Kentucky, it's like we have 2 different Kentuckys, because the rurality of this region, of the Appalachian region, because of the access, and it takes forever to sometimes get to a resource. It sounds like you've developed a portal or a platform that it doesn't make any difference if you're 3 hours away. You're seconds away from the activities that you need, or ideas or strategies. That's what I take from this.
Yeah, and like we began the conversation with, it's really based on what do you need and what do you do to be able to figure out how you use what you have in order to address that and meet that need. And we are still working. We're working more now with communities and partners external to the K-12 community. Because 4 or 5 years ago, we really consciously had the epiphany that school and community are inextricably interlinked. And I'm not going to put this on KVEC, but I have a belief that high stakes accountability, while it's important, while it's good, and while we all need to be accountable for the work that we should be doing, high stakes accountability testing in schools caused a wedge to be driven between a school and its local community. And the reason that happened is because school had to focus every ounce of energy on that accountability and that assessment model. That assessment is not necessarily fitting the needs of a community. And what we're trying to do is rebuild that. And we can help to do that by understanding that you can learn in place, that you can focus on what is right around you for the ability to learn science or to learn social studies or mathematics or English language arts. Any of that is available in place-based instruction. We also want to have the ability for our schools to address the challenges that exist within their districts. And in some cases, those challenge activities that students have developed in concert with teachers and community members have included winter gardens that can be done by the community, building, again, tiny houses, being able to figure out how to put wellness spaces in public locations so that folks can go there because there's no access to a gymnasium, how to figure out how to get potable water to a community that does not have it as of yet. Mm-hmm. And they go on and on. So all of that comes down to, I'd mentioned earlier that when we began the work, we wanted to focus on teaching, learning, and leadership. Most recently, we framed the way that we approach that work in another three-word phrase. We want everything we do to focus on every person being a learner, every person being a leader, and every person being a maker. And we believe that that closes the loop on what we should be involved in. Because if we're not learning, leading, and making every day, it begins to be a struggle to figure out, are we really, worth the oxygen that we're breathing? Mm-hmm. And we want to take that to that connection point so that community members can see the relevance of school to them, not just the scores. And those are important. I'm not underselling those, but it's important that community members understand that our kids, our teachers, are contributing to improving the quality of life within that community. And that's important for us.
And it sounds exactly like what you should be doing. All districts across the state should be doing. You're breaking down barriers to innovation. You're developing a system where everyone is involved, the community, the schools, other state and national organizations. You're moving forward. So my last question for you, some parting thoughts. You did a wonderful job taking us to how you got to where you are. You did a fantastic job explaining where we are, what we're trying to do, how we're displaying our storytelling, all the innovation. So where do you go from here? What's next?
We are always trying to figure out what's around the next curve in the road. And that's a term or a phrase that makes a lot of sense to us because we drive on curvy roads every day. Sometimes you can't see where that curve will end.
And by working here, I learned that's called a switchback.
Yeah, a switchback or a kiss your own hind end curve.
Yeah.
One or the other. Horseshoe.
Yeah.
But we're always looking to figure out what's around the next curve in the mm-hmm. road. And currently there are innovations that we're working on and designing specifically that fit into that big bucket of digital virtual learning, both for kids and for adults. Part of that is also focused on micro-credentials and how those can play a role. Yeah. Part of our work now is focusing on career technical education, not just how that is delivered, but what is the job of the future? Mm-hmm. What are the skill sets that our students are going to have to be invested with as they move forward? And that means that we have to work with lots of different agencies and lots of different industries to figure out what that is. Part of our work is, in conjunction with Battelle and other folks, a portrait of a graduate. What do we want our graduates to look like when they graduate from here? How do we build a curricula that is also based in part on entrepreneurialism so that we can draw those kids back here and we don't lose them to a different community as we go forward? So we're always figuring or trying to see what is going to be around the next curve in the road so that we're prepared for it.
Well, I appreciate those comments, and I appreciate you being here. And I'm just going to reiterate, for any interested in more information to see what's happening in the region with KVEC, go to theholler.org. Choose that banner to look at the design lab, but also go to the news stories, the podcasts, the videos. You can find micro-credential there. You can find specific to content, specific to special ed populations. So whatever you need, that's a great resource to go. And Jeff Hawkins, thank you for being here with us today. We look forward to continue working with you and having future conversations about what's happening next. And this is Robert Brown with the Kentucky Valley Educational Cooperative, and we will catch you on the next podcast.
Thank you, Rob. You're a great host. Thank you very much.